very mysterious case. This is a cover of a very important book. I have that book with me also. It's called An Alien Harvest by Linda Moulton Howe, and I would stress the importance to anyone who wants to get seriously into this subject. Her work is extremely valuable. She has a master's degree in communications from Stanford University. She's a brilliant speaker. Her books speak with authority and clarity, and they really drive home the high strangeness of this whole phenomena. Unfortunately, she talks about the dark side of ufology, which is cattle mutilation. This is her other book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1. The second volume is now out. This is a classically mutilated cow. Characteristically, the eye sockets are carved out in a perfectly circular manner. Tissue is excised from the jaw. There's virtually no blood at the scene. There's evidence of anal coring. And the oddest thing about all of these incidents is that in many years, over 30 years now, of documented cattle mutilation investigation, no one has ever been arrested. Even though everyone says, oh, it's done by cults, but no one can find the cults. No one finds, in many of these cases, any evidence that anybody has walked near the mutilated cow until it's recovered. This is an actual photograph taken by a deputy sheriff showing 3 marks in the ground that appear to be tripod impressions. This is a photograph showing the edges of tissue. The important thing about this tissue is that it was not cut with a steel instrument. It was cut with some sort of a high heat device. You have to excuse me, I'm trying to recover from a cold.
Yeah, it's been a few harsh days here.
These are micro photographs of tissue samples showing that the hemoglobin right near the edges of the cuts has been boiled. That is what is shown on the bottom. On the top of the slide is regular hemoglobin in the tissue. This is a picture of a report from the School of Veterinary Medicine in the University of Oregon. And down at the very bottom there, I know that it's hard to see, but it indicates that the tissue cuts are most consistent with a heat-induced injury. So obviously we're left to conclude that all of these cults who go out and mutilate the cows, they obviously drive around with portable lasers in the back of their pickup trucks that, by the way, don't leave any tire marks.
Sure they do, you know that.
Well, I knew it all along. This is a photograph of mysterious circles seen in the landscape near where some mutilated cattle were discovered. One of the things that occurs in this situation is that it's extremely frustrating and aggravating to the ranchers. We're going to change gears and get into a field that you're more familiar with.
Yes, very much so. Crop circles.
Exactly.
Crop circles, I got a chance to accidentally go visit some of them a couple of years ago while I was traveling, talking to the people in Isles. The coordinator for Washington, for the U.S., she was in England, and so she emailed me, and I went back and I got to go to, it was in excess of 110 circles in
I know that they're seasonal.
Illinois. Yeah.
Every year they appear in England and many other places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have some locally in, locally we have some in Chehalis. And here again, I had an experience and my hair fell out again. So I'm just not going to have any hair here sooner or later.
I'm going to follow you around, and whenever your hair falls out, I'll know something important is occurring. This is just showing the inside of the classic crop circle. These patterns have evolved over time. And for those who believe that this is some sort of natural phenomena, I would defy you to come up with a natural phenomena that can produce perfect rings and geometric shapes This is another important book called Harbingers of World Change by Alec Bartholomew. It has some of the most beautiful crop circles, at least my personal favorites. This is the Mandelbrot Formation, which was found near Cambridge, I believe in '93. And it is so perfect that it's hard to put words on it. It's so precise and so extraordinarily well formed.
That's one that I liked so well, I painted it on my RV, you know. This particular one here.
It's the symbol of the intersection between chaos and order. This particular diagram is produced when you run all of the numbers through a computer in chaos theory. One of the most important UFO books of all time is The Interrupted Journey by John G. Fuller, because it talks about Betty and Barney Hill and Dr. Benjamin Simon, who interviewed them separately. And Betty and Barney Hill were taking a trip together, and they had an abduction experience on September 19th of 1961. Now, they didn't even know that any of this had happened until they sought out medical help because of the ongoing series of symptoms that they suffered. And Barney died in his late 40s from high blood pressure, heart attacks, etc. Many people believe that it was also because he couldn't cope with the stress of the event. Now, Betty Hill, on the other hand, she went on to become a famous UFO researcher, and to this day, I think she's still involved.
I believe so, yeah.
Their story was not published until 5 years after it happened. This is just a map showing the route that they traveled that night. They originally saw a bright star that eventually became a huge oblong craft with a double row of windows. They were confronted by beings who took them on board the craft for the classic medical examinations. Betty was able to draw from memory a star map in 3 dimensions that she saw on board the spacecraft. She was shown this map by the leader. It turns out that approximately 2 or 3 years after this drawing went public, they discovered the actual formation of stars that the map seems to pretty well match up to. She said that the leader of the expedition told her that the darkened lines were trade routes. The cover of the book, Fire in the Sky, The Travis Walton Experience. November 5th, 1975, I'm sure many people have seen the movie. I just want to add, for those who think that the movie tells the whole story, I would say that a lot of the movie is true, providing that you leave out the whole middle portion of what supposedly happened to Travis while he was on board the spacecraft. What's interesting to note, 2 days later, November 7th, 1975, at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, there was an alarm at the K-7 missile silo. Sabotage alert teams responded, and then they refused to enter the missile silo area because there was a large orange UFO hovering over the compound. And you would say, well, how do we know that? And the reason we know that, that's from the command director's log at NORAD. Once again, documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act.
Peter Davenport makes reference to NORAD a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the book Intruders, The Incredible Visitations at Copley Woods. Bud Hopkins, I highly recommend this book. This is another really important text. They made an excellent TV, I believe it's a 2-part miniseries on that with Richard Crenna starring in it, which I think you can now rent. One of the things in that book are the drawings of the Greys, and the Greys, like our friend here on the table, it's really odd that people, no matter where they get abducted, keep reporting the same kind of being over and over again, which really makes me wonder, since I don't know 2 people who have the same dreams.
Now, he's on my webpage.
Well, he ought to be.
Yeah.
And at that point, that's the conclusion of my slideshow presentation. And I hope that that kind of challenges everybody to have a different view of the universe and a different view of the UFO phenomena.
well, challenge is the right word. You know, it's very interesting, and it just goes from this extreme to that extreme. There's many things in between. Personally, I think there's a difference between abductions and contacts, and that's another subject we might want to cover at one time. Well, let's see. I'm trying to see if there's anything local that we maybe left out. There was
I did investigate a case of two fishermen
horse.
on
Did
Mount
you do
Rainier.
the horse?
Oh,
Oh,
yes,
yeah,
we did. That was the same summer,
yeah,
too.
yeah. Let's do the fisherman, and then we do the horse.
This was in 1988 again, and I was sent to contact two fishermen who live in Hoquiam, Washington. And the story that they had to tell was extraordinary. I interviewed them independently, and they were on a fishing trip together. They were near a campground, and they were in a small pickup truck. So one of them's driving, one of them's a passenger. The first thing that they see is that they think that they're going to watch an airliner do an emergency landing on the highway, because they see this incredibly intense spotlight coming down over the roadway. And then they realize that that's not what's going on, because when the object gets above them, it's another one of these mysterious triangular craft, and it stops over them. So this makes them scared, and they decide that they better keep going on down the highway. And the weird part is, this triangular craft, when they start moving down the road, it backs through the air. And the faster they go, the faster it goes. And finally, in a total panic, they pulled off into a camping area, and the craft changed directions instantly and took off at an unbelievable rate of speed over the hills, and that was the last they saw of it.
I've seen them do that. They get right over you, and just as you think you know what it is, they flip back on you and they change directions, and it's pretty awesome.
And I keep wondering, of course, we all want to know, why are they here? What are they doing? Is this surveillance? Is it archaeology? Is it reconnaissance for an invasion? Is it because they're trying to gradually acclimate us to their presence? We've talked about that before.
Well, I believe that it's just all part of a new awareness and how the world really is. And if you go back into history, they've really always been part of us. It's just now all of a sudden we get more interested in with all the theories. And, you know, we blame the government for a lot of things, but myself being from a different country, I do know that the government sort of works with what they inherited, because it isn't really their
That's
stuff.
a very important point.
You know, it's not really their stuff that they got, so they just have to take what was handed to them over these 4 and 8 year terms here. And all in all, I think they're getting a little friendlier, what you say?
I think so. I think also, I have to say, in all fairness to the government agencies, it turns out in these new Majestic 12 documents that are being released that among the original crash retrieval cases, they picked up 3 bodies. And the technicians, I believe there were 4 technicians who helped with this body recovery, and they died from unexplained causes within 48 hours of the time that they handled these bodies. And they described it as bleeding out. In other words, almost like an Ebola virus infection. And we have to put this in a historical context. This is 1947. World War II is over. We know that we're entering into the Cold War phase with the Russians. Nobody's quite sure who's going to be top dog in the world. We recover a spacecraft, we recover bodies, and now we find out that there's a possibility that they may be carrying a disease which presumably we couldn't lick.
Well, yeah, but...
What would you do if you were the government official?
I'd be quiet.
Exactly.
I just would be quiet.
That's exactly it, Lillian. And maybe in all fairness, they tried to do what they thought was right.
Yeah.
And the policy of secrecy, the military tends to do the same thing over and over again, and politicians tend to take the safest course of action. And maybe not telling us the truth and keeping us in the dark was the safest course of action. But now we're beginning to get the feeling, in fact, the new Majestic 12 documents pretty much prove this, that there are elements within the government who want the truth to come out, and they are deliberately leaking important information to UFO researchers. And maybe this is all part of their way of getting us ready.
Yeah, like we mentioned in the last segment, that with the commercials and the X-Files and things like that, it's just becoming a bigger part of our reality. So in a way, it is less threatening, and I believe that's really good. Because when we look in the tabloids and everywhere, everything is doomsday. We so negative as a whole right now, and so I think shows like this, in people like us, is somewhat important to make the people aware, and then what do we do next, and how can we put it in a three-dimensional context here.
I can't think of anything that would be more important to me, and I think by extension to anybody who's a searcher, anybody with a curious mind who wants to get at the truth. There couldn't be anything more important than trying to know who we really are in the universe. This would give us possible insights into some of the deepest questions. Why are we here? What's life? What's God? I mean, what is the big meaning? Mm-hmm. And the only way we could really even get a grip on that would be to possibly contact other types of beings and try to see how they've grappled with those questions. And perhaps some people have speculated that we may be even, in some senses, an experiment, or in some senses, we may have been genetically programmed to survive and flourish on the earth. So there's a possibility in that age-old argument between the creationists and the evolutionists, maybe they're both right.
Maybe they are both right, and the thing is, if we can just coexist, everything will probably be okay. Would you agree?
Absolutely, because perhaps when we meet these beings and they look at us, they're going to look at us just as people of the earth. They won't see us as different races or different nations or anything else. And some people have speculated that's why they're also reluctant to tell us the truth, because they've realized that a lot of us are going to look at things a lot differently once we realize that we are the people of the planet Earth. There actually isn't such a thing as the United States or Russia or any other country.
Right.
Those are political conveniences that we've created to get the job done. But in all reality, this is one world and one people.
Yeah, so we all related by universal consciousness.
Absolutely.
In a way, yeah, we are. Let's see. Maybe we would have another minute, and I would like for you to show us the front of David Chase's book again.
I do. I think that would be a good thing to do.
That seems to be one of my favorites. He's like a forensic artist type person that
I've watched him do these drawings.
That creates drawings from people's memories as they present it. In my own book, I make reference to David Chase quite often.
He's done these extraordinary drawings. I've watched him just sit for long periods of time and do these incredibly intricate diagrams. He has an extraordinary talent, and he's also quite knowledgeable on the subject of UFOs as a whole.
So let me ask you this. Would you happen to know Fred Epps? He's a gentleman that owns a bookstore in Seattle. And out of all the people I've ever met, he has the most knowledge of alien beings. And it turns out he reads. He reads all this in books, and then he puts it together so nicely. And it just makes you feel like he has like he's their next door neighbor. He gives you their history, who they are, where they come from. And he just has such knowledge that he read about. So.
I guess that sort of leads into an important point. If I can't bring you a UFO in here. I wish that I could. I can't bring an alien being up here to be interviewed. But if I had to go into a court of law and prove that this is a real phenomena, I could do it. I could prove the existence of UFOs in contact with human beings in any courtroom in the world because of the overwhelming amount of eyewitness testimony by credible people. We mentioned before 4,000 plus physical trace cases. Now that people have camcorders, we're getting more and more film footage. The dam is breaking. What has been a curtain of silence is being torn down. People are no longer subjects of ridicule just because they've had a UFO encounter.
Exactly. So, and there are people like myself of high strangeness. In fact, you're the one that defined that for me in my writings. We're almost at the end of this segment here. And so I want to thank you for being my guest.
It's been a pleasure.
I would like to tell the friends out there that what we plan on doing is if you write me a postcard, my address will be shown at the end of the show. If you give me your name, I will pick a name and ask you to come and see me when we do one of these shows, and I will do a mini reading for you because I'm also one of the local intuitives, you know. And we will talk about books sometimes. We will talk about movies and just fun things. And we live in really complicated times now where everybody is very stressed out. And so what I like to stress to you is to be good to yourself, and whatever you do, keep your sense of humor. And again, thank you very much for visiting with me. Until the next time. And thank you, James. It was so nice for you to come. And thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome.
Yes. Good night.